In November 1942, during the North African campaign, German forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stormed toward a key stronghold near Tobruk. Before them stretched a vast desert, its golden sands scorching under a relentless sun that blurred the air with heat. Yet the German soldiers marched in lockstep, their discipline forged like steel. They had crushed Poland, swept through France, and driven the Soviet Red Army to the brink of despair. In their hands, the Karabiner 98K, the Wehrmacht standard rifle, stood as a symbol of precision, power, and unshakable confidence in victory. But then, amid the swirling dust and chaos of the battlefield, a new sound cut through the air, rapid, rhythmic, unlike any firing cadence they knew. It wasn't the chatter of an MG-42 or the thud of mortars. It was a relentless stream of bullets, flying at nearly twice the speed of their bolt-action rifles. The Germans looked up to see American soldiers, fresh to the North African theatre, wielding an unfamiliar weapon. The M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle they had never faced before. In a November 1942 combat report from the Afrika Korps to Berlin, a note read, "The Americans employ a semi-automatic rifle with superior firing speed. Further verification required." But back in Berlin, high-ranking officers dismissed it, scoffing that frontline troops were exaggerating. They couldn't believe a single rifle could shift the tide of battle against the finely honed Wehrmacht. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a rude awakening. In early 1941, from the snow-swept fields of the Soviet front to the small towns of the Balkans, the sight of German soldiers marching in perfect formation, Karabiner 98K rifles slung over their shoulders, had become an all-too-familiar symbol. To allies and enemies alike, that rifle wasn't just a weapon, it embodied the iron discipline and raw military might of Nazi Germany. The Kar-98K, short for Karabiner 98 Kurz, was a refined descendant of the Gewehr 98, a rifle that had dominated the battlefields of World War I. In 1935, the Wehrmacht made it their standard-issue rifle, with its sturdy wooden stock, a nearly 60 centimeters long barrel, and a reliable bolt-action mechanism. The Kar-98K fired the 7.9 2x57mm Mauser round, renowned for its deep penetration and stability at long range. In the hands of a seasoned marksman, it could drop a target from over 500 meters away. The Kar-98K proved its worth far beyond the training grounds. In Poland in 1939, its pinpoint accuracy, paired with the relentless advance of panzer tanks, obliterated pockets of resistance. In 1940, on the French front, German sharpshooters wielding Kar-98Ks controlled bridges and crossroads, paving the way for the Blitzkrieg to tear through enemy lines. And during Operation Barbarossa in 1941, amid Russia's frozen wastes, the Kar-98K became a trusted companion light, dependable, unfazed by the bitter cold, helping the Wehrmacht seize thousands of kilometers of territory in just the first few months. The Germans placed unwavering trust in the Kar-98K. Every soldier was drilled relentlessly. Raise, aim, fire, cycle the bolt, each motion as instinctive as breathing. In their combat doctrine, the Kar-98K was a satellite, orbiting the true heart of the squad, the devastating firepower of the MG-34, and later the MG-42. A 1941 Wehrmacht training report put it bluntly. Disciplined fire and squad focus outweigh disorganized speed. With the Kar-98K and synchronized machine gun support, the Wehrmacht seemed an unstoppable war machine. That was the confidence German soldiers carried into the North African desert in late 1942, a confidence about to be tested by a new foe wielding a semi-automatic rifle they had never encountered before. On the 8th of November 1942, North Africa shook. Operation Torch, the first major American amphibious assault of World War II, had begun. Over 100,000 U.S. troops crossed the Atlantic, storming the shores of Morocco and Algeria, territories held by German and Italian forces. At an outpost near Oran, Wehrmacht Lieutenant Hans Richter scribbled in his diary, We laughed when we heard the Americans were coming. We thought them green, their weapons second-rate. Our Kar-98Ks and MG-34S had crushed France and bloodied the Soviets. Why fear these Yanks? In those early hours, that confidence held firm. German soldiers calmly aimed, cycled their bolts, and fired in the familiar rhythm that had spread terror across Europe. But then, the battlefield answered with a different sound. Not the sporadic, solitary cracks they knew. Instead, a relentless, steady barrage of gunfire erupted from the American lines. At first, some Germans smirked, assuming their foes were wasting ammo or relying on lightweight submachine guns. But within minutes, those smirks faded into a heavy, uneasy silence. A Wehrmacht report from Tunis, December 1942, noted, American infantry firepower was far heavier than anticipated. Their rate of fire was so rapid that we initially thought they were equipped with an abundance of submachine guns. Richter echoed this in his memoirs. When I peeked over the trench, 3 bullets whizzed by in the blink of an eye. This wasn't machine gun fire, it came from individual riflemen. These weren't the French or Soviets we'd faced before. While German soldiers paused to work the bolt after each shot, the Americans just kept pulling the trigger, unleashing a relentless stream of fire. In that moment, many German troops realized they weren't up against naive recruits, but a force armed with weapons that turned every soldier into a walking arsenal. For the first time, the Wehrmacht's firing cadence, once a terrifying hallmark, felt painfully sluggish. The initial disdain they held for their enemy quickly gave way to genuine alarm. To grasp why the Germans were so stunned, we need to rewind nearly 2 decades to the story of a Canadian-born engineer who immigrated to the United States, John Cantius Garand. In the 1922, Garand was working at Springfield Armory, chasing a vision that seemed almost unthinkable at the time, equipping every American soldier with a semi-automatic rifle. While the rest of the world clung to the belief that bolt-action rifles like the Kar-98K were the gold standard, reliable, accurate, and easy to maintain, Garand dove headfirst into bold experimentation. He developed a gas-operated mechanism that automatically cycled the rifle with each shot. After countless tests and refinements, by 1936, the U.S. Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard-issue rifle. What made the Garand stand out? For starters, it was semi-automatic. Just pull the trigger. No need to manually cycle the bolt after every round. Ammunition came in an 8-round en-bloc clip, which could be quickly loaded even in the chaos of battle. Its gas-operated system made it one of the most advanced designs of its era. The difference in firing rate was staggering. The German Kar-98K could manage 15 to 20 rounds per minute, assuming a soldier maintained a steady and precise rhythm. The M1 Garand, on the other hand, easily hit 40 to 50 rounds per minute while still maintaining accuracy. General George S. Patton, who later led American forces in Sicily, famously called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. On the battlefield, every American soldier wielding a Garand wasn't just carrying a rifle, they were armed with a revolutionary edge. But even the most superior weapon is useless without the ability to produce it en masse. And this is where America soared, showcasing a strength Germany could never match, the might of a fully industrialized nation. In the 1930 seconds, the United States had been brought to its knees by the Great Depression. Factories stood silent, millions of workers jobless. But after the 7th of December 1941, Pearl Harbor, America awoke like a giant roused from slumber. Assembly lines once churning out Ford cars and John Deere tractors pivoted to rifles, ammunition, and tanks. Springfield Armory and Winchester transformed into colossal forges of democracy, where cold metal was shaped into gleaming M1 Garands. And on those production lines, it wasn't just men. Tens of thousands of American women stood shoulder to shoulder with drill presses and welding torches. Every cut they made, every weld they perfected, was a heartbeat sent to the front lines. They didn't carry rifles, but they equipped their sons, brothers, husbands, and millions of their comrades with the tools to push back the shadow of fascism. As General Dwight D. Eisenhower once said, Our factories were our second front. The results were nothing short of extraordinary. By 1945, over 4 million M1 Garands had rolled off the production lines. Those rifles crossed the Atlantic, swept through the Mediterranean, stormed the beaches of Normandy, climbed the hills of Italy, and planted flags on Iwo Jima. Each Garand was a testament that America fought not just with guns, but with the resolve and hands of an entire nation. Meanwhile, Nazi Germany, despite its early battlefield dominance, was helpless to scale its technology. The G41 and G43 rifles emerged, but were plagued by glitches, unreliable, and produced in mere trickles. Most German soldiers were still clutching the Kar-98K, a relic of World War I, while American troops held the weapon of a new era. The gap was undeniable. America had turned industry into a weapon, forged resolve into steel, and transformed setbacks into overwhelming strength. This wasn't just the story of a rifle, it was proof that when a nation unites, it can bend the course of history itself. On the 10th of July 1943, dawn broke over Sicily in a blaze of fire. The white sands of Gela Beach bore the bootprints of American soldiers from the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. They clung tightly to their M1 Garands as German Ju 88 seconds and Stukas roared overhead, raining bombs onto the shore. Facing them were battle-hardened German and Italian units, armed with Kar-98Ks, MG-42S, and coastal defense guns. The Germans, who had once shattered French armies and crushed Soviet divisions, believed these few thousand green American troops would be swept away in no time. But then, their confidence crumbled. Volley after volley, the Garands roared without pause. The Kar-98K's 15 to 20 rounds per minute couldn't hold a candle to the Garand's 40-50. While German soldiers fumbled with their bolts, realigning their sights after each shot, American troops just kept squeezing the trigger, maintaining a relentless cadence. A war correspondent for Stars and Stripes captured the scene. The Germans thought they had the upper hand, but in mere minutes, our semi-automatic firepower snuffed out their machine gun nests and cut down every enemy squad that dared to charge from their trenches. The Battle of Gela became a living testament. The Garand wasn't just a rifle, it was a doctrine, a decision from Washington that every American soldier deserved the finest firepower available. From Sicily, the M1 Garand's reputation spread like wildfire. German reports began describing a strange, rapid-firing rifle. And in their records, one chilling line stood out. The Americans wield semi-automatic rifles as if they're standard issue. They shoot without ever stopping. On the 6th of June 1944, the skies over Normandy thundered with the roar of thousands of Allied aircraft engines. Aboard cramped landing craft, American soldiers from the 29th and 1st Divisions gripped their Garands tightly. Facing them, Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Gun emplacements, MG-42S, mines, and barbed wire all convinced the Germans that no one could survive setting foot on Omaha Beach. High in a bunker, German Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Mertens, a veteran of Kharkov and Stalingrad, peered through his binoculars. He was certain his Kar-98Ks and MG-42S could obliterate the incoming American wave. He'd seen the Soviet Red Army collapse under firestorms on the Eastern Front. Why would today be any different? But as American troops pushed through wet sand and barbed wire, Mertens heard an eerily familiar sound, not the slow, deliberate cracks of bolt-action rifles. Instead, a relentless, precise barrage rang out like a deadly orchestra. It was the M1 Garand. While German soldiers paused to work their bolts shot by shot, American troops unleashed a relentless stream of fire, pinning down every pillbox slit. Each American seemed to wield the firepower of 3 Germans. A Wehrmacht report dated the 15th of June 1944 bluntly lamented, "The enemy hardly pauses to reload. Their firepower feels twice as heavy as their actual numbers." The bunkers, once deemed impregnable, fell silent under the hail of Garand rounds, combined with grenades and naval artillery. Hitler's vaunted defensive system, a source of pride, now teetered before soldiers shouldering a weapon the Germans had initially scoffed at. Within the first week at Normandy, German units sent urgent dispatches to Berlin, describing the Garand as a technological edge for the Americans. But by then, it was far too late. American factories had churned out over 3 million Garands, while Germany had only managed a smattering of experimental G-43s outdated and in short supply. In the rain-soaked night of Normandy, the 12th of June, 1944, Private Hans Weber, a 20-year-old from Cologne, huddled in a makeshift shelter. His trembling hands scrawled a few lines in a sodden notebook. "We were taught that our Kar-98K was the most accurate and reliable rifle in the world. We believed it until we met the Americans. They don't pause to work a bolt like we do. A single American soldier can fire 8 rounds in a flash, then reload in a heartbeat. I watched my comrades fall, one by one, not because they were lesser men, but because they couldn't shoot back fast enough." Hans had once believed that iron discipline and the MG-42 machine gun, Hitler's buzzsaw, would form an unbreakable wall. But even the MG-42 couldn't close the gap when every American carried what amounted to a personal semi-automatic war machine. Lieutenant Colonel Fritz Bayerlein, after the Normandy battles, reported bluntly to his superiors, "The American rifle doubles the firepower in each soldier's hands. They shoot while moving, shoot while advancing, while our men must stop to chamber each round. This is a disadvantage no amount of spirit or discipline can overcome." In every diary page, every report, the truth grew clearer. The Kar-98K, once a source of pride, was now a fading shadow of the past, outmatched by the Garand, the bullet-spitting machine America placed in the hands of every soldier. The 6th of June 1944, Omaha Beach. In a frigid concrete bunker, German Sergeant Kurt Hoffmann clutched his Kar-98K. He'd fought through Poland, marched into Paris, and survived the brutal winter on the Eastern Front. He thought he'd seen every kind of warfare. But that day, Normandy showed him something no battle had ever taught. Through the narrow gun slit, Kurt watched American figures loom through the smoke and swirling sand. They didn't fire slow, deliberate shots like the British or Soviets. They didn't pause to work a bolt. Instead, each American soldier seemed to become a one-man machine gun, their relentless volleys pounding like a deafening swarm. Kurt took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. A single Mauser round flew. He yanked the bolt back, losing a heartbeat's time. When he looked up again, 3 Garand rounds screamed toward him. One grazed his ear, another slammed into the concrete wall behind him. His chest tightened, not from a hit, but from the sheer shock of a firepower he'd never witnessed. Back at the command post, frantic telegrams reported, "The Americans have too many machine guns." But they weren't machine guns. They were just Garands in the hands of ordinary soldiers. In those first brutal hours at Omaha, German officers began to realize their battle doctrine, built around the vaunted MG-42, the pride of the Wehrmacht, was being challenged. When every American soldier's baseline firepower was twice as potent, they didn't have to rely solely on squad-level machine guns. Down on the beach, amid the shrieking hail of MG-42 rounds tearing through the air, Private Jack Reynolds of the 1st Infantry Division pressed himself flat behind an anti-tank obstacle. Kar-98K bullets thudded into the sand inches away. He recalled his training back in the States. "Don't stop. The Garand will handle the rest. Just pull the trigger and keep pulling." Jack peeked out and fired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots in mere seconds. His buddies beside him did the same. In that moment, they threw up a wall of lead that forced the Germans to duck. Later, in his memoirs, Jack wrote, "If we'd been stuck with bolt-action rifles, none of us would have made it off that beach. But with the Garand, we knew we could shoot back, keep their heads down, and crawl a few more yards." And as General George S. Patton had declared, the M1 Garand truly was the greatest battle implement ever devised. At Omaha, the Garand wasn't just a weapon, it was a chance to survive, a strategic edge, and proof that America had stepped onto the world stage with both ingenuity and industrial might. As the gun smoke cleared, German soldiers from bunkers to command posts were forced to confront a bitter truth. The M1 Garand had transformed every American soldier into a firepower force far beyond what numbers suggested. And that was something their discipline and pride could never catch up to. With Garands in hand, a single American squad, just 12 men, could unleash a volume of fire matching or surpassing a larger German unit. No longer wholly reliant on machine guns, each soldier became a source of suppressing fire. This made their tactics more flexible and boosted morale. They knew, in every firefight, they'd never be outpaced by the enemy. In contrast, the Germans were trapped by their outdated doctrine. They believed bolt-action rifles paired with the MG42 were enough, and by the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Their rushed attempts with the G41 and G43 produced only a few 100,000 rifles, far too few to shift the tide. The difference wasn't just in tactics, it was in industry. While Berlin was being blasted to rubble, American factories in Springfield and Winchester were churning out thousands of new Garands around the clock. By 1945, over 4 million M1 Garands had hit the battlefields, a number the Nazis could never even dream of matching. It's no coincidence that General George S. Patton called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. He knew this rifle turned every American soldier into a game-changer in the crucible of combat. And long after the war, the Garand's shadow stretched from Korea to parade grounds, where the iconic ping of its clip became a sound etched in history. The Garand didn't just reshape how America fought in World War II. It redefined how the world saw the power of a single soldier. The Germans thought they had the winning formula: iron discipline, the pinpoint car, 9.8K, and the blazing MG42. They believed that combination could crush any foe, but on the beaches of Normandy, in the dense Ardennes forests, and across the scorched hills of Sicily, their formula was tested and shattered by something they hadn't counted on: a semi-automatic rifle in the hands of every American GI. Without the M1 Garand, key strongholds might have held longer, and more American boys might have fallen under relentless enemy fire. But with its near-double firing rate and unyielding suppressive power, they didn't just survive, they advanced, step by step, carving open the path back to Europe. To those young soldiers, the Garand wasn't just steel and wood. It was the confidence that they could face the world's fiercest enemy and still have a shot at coming home. It was that unmistakable ping ringing out, signaling an empty clip, but also telling their buddies another rifle was ready to fire, covering their advance. The Germans scoffed at the Garand, until they learned the hard way that it had changed the rhythm of battle. And when American flags flew over Paris and Berlin crumbled into ashes, the cost of that underestimation became a chapter of history that could never be unwritten. In the end, looking back on the journey from the dim streets of Berlin to the radiant cities of America, Kurt Zimmermann and his fellow soldiers saw more than just a material divide. They recognized a profound difference in mindset, freedom, and the way people were treated. Stepping out from the shadows of their old beliefs, they entered a world they'd once thought existed only in foreign books and reports. From that moment, their view of the world, of Germany, and of themselves was forever transformed. Every sight was a jolt, but also a lesson in efficiency, fairness, and humanity. Men who had once fought for a totalitarian regime now understood that true strength wasn't just in weapons, but in the ability to foster prosperity, respect individuals, and manage society with wisdom. When they returned to Germany, many former prisoners applied the knowledge, technology, and organizational methods they'd learned in America, contributing to West Germany's economic miracle of the 1,950 seconds. They brought back not just techniques, but a deep gratitude for the Americans who had cared for, educated, and treated even their enemies with humanity. This showed them the value of freedom, cooperation, and human dignity. Through these experiences, former soldiers who once fought for Hitler became quiet ambassadors of democracy, helping to build a new Germany grounded in lessons. With over 4 million Garands produced, every American soldier became a mobile fire base, transforming how battles were fought. From Normandy to the Ardennes, from Sicily to the Rhine, the Garand was there in the hands of ordinary men carrying out extraordinary missions. When World War II ended, General George S. Patton declared, The M1 Garand is the greatest battle implement ever devised. And he was right. It didn't just win fights, it changed how Americans entered war with confidence, resolve, and a refusal to be underestimated. Thanks to the Garand, America learned a vital lesson. A nation triumphs not just through spirit, but through meticulous preparation and a belief in innovation. Ordinary soldiers, farm boys, factory workers, college kids carried the Garand on their shoulders and marched across Europe. Every round fired was more than firepower. It was a statement that the world was entering a new era, with America at the forefront. As the stars and stripes flew over Berlin, the M1 Garand didn't just end a war, it ushered in a new order, with America stepping onto the global stage as victors. The Garand's legacy didn't fade in 1945. After the war, it laid the groundwork for a new generation of weapons from the M14 to modern rifles like the AR-15 and M16. Each successor carried a spark of the Garand's spirit, a blend of speed, reliability, and mass production. To Americans, the Garand was more than a rifle. It was a symbol of an era when an entire nation, from factory workers to frontline soldiers, proved that industry and resolve could reshape history. When we talk about World War II, the Garand isn't just steel and wood, it's the heartbeat of victory.